On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Rebecca Greene. She is the co-founder and CTO at Regal.io. She has a great product background and she's moved into engineering leadership, and she's going to talk to us about that journey, that process, how she balances those two hats. And I'm super excited to have you on the podcast, Rebecca. So thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So two things before we start. Tell everyone what Regal does. And I know you're the co-founder, CTO, but what are some of your responsibilities there?
So Regal is an outbound phone and SMS sales solution built to drive more conversations for B2C brands so they can hit their growth goals way faster. We focus on what we call considered purchase categories, such as you think of SoFi, the Farmer's Dog, Angie, where they're selling something that's not pure retail. It's something important and a hard decision, and our software helps them reach out to the right customers who are struggling to make a purchase decision and help them connect over a conversation and make that decision. My responsibilities at Regal, so I'm obviously a co-founder, so I have lots of hats that I wear, but I'm specifically responsible for the product, engineering, design, and data teams, as well as our people and talent teams.
So I guess, I mentioned that you started in product, and obviously now you're leading the broader engineering efforts. I guess take us back to a little bit about that product background, just to kind of put some context in terms of how you started off.
Yeah. In fact, I didn't start my career in product even. I traditionally started in financial services and consulting, working with banks, and I realized that they were begrudgingly adopting technology mostly to deflect customers and lower cost to serve, not really innovate on behalf of customers. And so that's kind of when I decided I wanted to go be in tech and work for companies like Amazon or Facebook, these companies I was using in my personal life as a consumer, and thought, man, these products are awesome and I want to be a part of this. And the best way to do that without a technical background, without a comp sci undergrad, was to get into product management. And so I actually ended up going to business school, which is for some reason, that's a hack to get into product management if you have no product skills or technical skills. And I ended up working at Amazon right out of business school in their digital music group. But so that's how I initially got into product, and started out in big tech so I could see how product was done by the best people, the best minds in product, and specifically at the most customer-centric organization, which was really important to me. And then I had an opportunity to go work at a startup called Handy, which I was at for 6 years and eventually became the chief product officer there. But I wasn't from the start. I was a GM of the San Francisco Bay Area market. I was head of retention. I led the growth marketing efforts. I had every other role for the first couple of years before getting back into product, and then started to grow and lead that product team. And that included data and design as well. So it was kind of the way into product for me actually was through business and analytics and data, and working at companies that I would say were technology enabled. They weren't themselves what they were selling was not necessarily the software, the algorithm, right? Like Google does, but it was a business like Handy that was trying to bring home services online with a marketplace model that had these really interesting, incentives and economics to that. And product and engineering was an enabler to that business succeeding. And then that business ended up getting sold to Angie's List, or it's called Angie Home Services now. And then I left to start our own. My co-founder and I came from Handy. We started our own business. But that was kind of my path through to product.
I guess, you mentioned the path, business school, got into product, see it in, from the best perspective. Now you've gone through the process of a chief product officer, your own company. Now you're the CTO as well. I guess, when I kind of hear that and I'm trying to, that transition, obviously you've picked up some core technical skills to understand engineering, run engineering. You obviously have a deep understanding of product. I guess where does engineering start and end for you, just to kind of put that in context?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely blurred. I think there's not a super crisp or clear line between product and engineering, particularly when in this business, the product is software that we're building, right? So this is not a technology-enabled business like the last ones I've been a part of, but this is actually selling technology or software. And, there's obvious things that are distinct about product and engineering, right? It's classically the product managers here and myself, when I have my product hat on, are thinking about what are the customer needs and pain points, and what's the thing that we should build to solve that, and thinking even more about, well, what's the hypothesis behind the solution, and what's the minimum viable thing that we could put into the world that would potentially start solving that problem and get feedback from customers so we could learn if we're right or wildly wrong. And then I think the line then that starts engineering, and in our spec docs, it's a very clear line that says, write the tech doc. But it's thinking about, okay, I generally have a solution in mind from a product person in terms of what it should be able to do and what pain point it solves for our user, what it will enable them to do. But it's not prescriptive about exactly how we should build that. What technology should we use? How should the business logic work exactly? And how, what does the performance need to be, and all of those things? And that's where, the engineering hat comes on. And that's for a very specific feature or project. It's even harder to draw the line, honestly, when I think about the organization and what does it mean to be leading the product team and thinking about what is the vision for the product and what's the roadmap and all of that. And then what is the engineering team and the process around engineering and how we deliver great product and raise our product bar. Those are very blurred for me personally. That is the honest answer.
I mean, that certainly makes sense. And I guess you come from a non-technology background. You're the CTO. How do you balance the engineering responsibilities? And I guess at Regal.io.
Yeah, so I actually hired our first, I want to say like 20, 25 engineers. We have 40 engineers now. So I very quickly got an education. I mean, while I was at Handy, even though I wasn't leading the engineering team, because I was leading the product team and worked closely with our head of engineering, I became much more technical. I am technical when it comes to data stuff and SQL and Python and that kind of stuff. But I became more technical just having exposure to engineers and the engineering problems and learning what was easy and what was hard and why. And specifically having a data background, understood the data models behind what we were building. And I found that if you understand the data model, you can kind of understand how the feature is being built. So that was my window into becoming more technical and understanding more of what our team was building and how they were building it and what technical decisions they were leading to. But I had zero visibility into infrastructure choices, for example. And it turned out with Regal, it was really important, some of the infrastructure choices we made early on, to be on serverless for much of our data pipeline and to use streaming technologies and not the classic batch and send. And so, that was honestly, it wasn't being lucky. It was through the talent that I hired that we were able to make those right choices, and I was able to evaluate those choices. And I think because I'm not an engineer and I can't just get into the documentation or get in the technical documentation or get into the code and like look side by side with the leaders that I've hired in engineering and just like nod along, they actually have to do more work to like get my buy-in, right? And I think it makes them better, and I think it makes them better I think they make better engineering choices that are motivated not just by what's the shiny new technology or what seems cool, but it really validates that we're solving the problem. So examples, they have to do more. They have to write more documentation for me or for other product managers now to read and get their buy-in. They had to like show, not tell in a lot of other ways. Like we had to implement things like Datadog really early on. So I could be like, okay, I don't understand how this thing is working. Like, show me the data, right? And I think they had to do that show, not tell much earlier in the life of a company than would classically have to happen if they had a technical CTO or co-founder leading the company. And I'm sure there's trade-offs and things that didn't work as well, But I think those things made us make better choices, even around things like infra, which was wildly out of my wheelhouse at the time.
That's interesting because I think obviously, there's different approaches to that. And I guess given your product background, you're probably envisioning how everything's tying back to the product anyways. And obviously that's core to your background, core to what the company's going to need. I guess when you kind of are listening to those conversations on the technology side, show more tell in terms of the actual tech, and you're thinking product, how do you kind of put those boundaries to go, hey, I can't be completely product focused, but also I'm sure it's difficult to turn it off because your mind probably dotted lines back a little bit?
I mean, part of it is just being a founder, right? Like things that are important to me as a founder make it so that I'm not just thinking about the product. I'm thinking about the cost of the infrastructure choices that we're making. How am I going to hire engineers to work on this product if we're picking technologies that are very niche and people don't know them, right? So I think a lot of technology leaders have to think that way. CTOs have to think like, not just what are we building and why, but also how am I going to hire engineers for that to maintain it? Like, when is it going to reach its end of life? Or like all those things that a good CTO is thinking about. I think I thought about it not because I had my product hat on, but because I had my founder hat on anyway. So I think that helped bridge some of those things. And then I think the other thing was, I did hire technical leaders. I probably hired, my first senior leader was a director, and he was deeply technical to kind of make up for what I lacked. And I specifically wanted that, even though I think most people would have said, like, you don't need someone quite that technical at this stage of the company. But I wanted to find someone I trusted and have that counterpart, because that person could then, given that I trusted them, they could say, like, trust me, Rebecca, like this part you might not understand. Like, I'll still do my best to try to bridge it and help you understand it so that I feel like I'm making the right choice. But it was by having a leader that I trusted. And it started out as a director, and then we ended up having also a VP of engineering as the team scaled to focus more on culture and team building and all of that. But so, yeah, I think we probably have a more mature and technical leadership team on our engineering, from manager to director to VP, to balance my skill set as the CTO.
Interesting. Do you see a time? I mean, obviously, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you foresee a time where you might give up the CTO title just to focus on product more, or do you like? And it's a unique viewpoint, right? Like, you have this product background, you're responsible for the technology direction. Obviously, you have very strong leaders who are capable of executing. But do you think that you give up the title and focus on product more?
Absolutely. To the first half of your question, would I give up the title? Absolutely. I think, I haven't researched this deeply, but I think like the biggest difference between, call it a VP of engineering and a CTO, is, VP of engineering can build the team and execute and make sure we're executing the roadmap and building the right engineering processes. But I think to be a CTO, you need to be more, not just a company leader of the engineering team, but you need to be more of an industry leader in the space that we operate and the technology. And you need to be able to be more external facing to the industry and to customers and sell enterprise customers and be a part of that sales process. I think that's the biggest difference. And so I play that role today. And turns out you need to be less technical to do that than to actually like truly like lead the internal organization, the engineering org. But so, yeah, absolutely. I would love to at some point give up that title. I generally have the philosophy I'd love to give up every title that I have at the company at some point, other than co-founder, hopefully, because that means I'm finding better and better talent to do the job than what I'm able to do individually. And it means we're scaling such that that's necessary, that I can't do every job. And we've already hit some of those points. But I would say the same on product too. It's not so that I would be able to focus more on the product. Like, I hope to hire a product leader as well. It's so that I can focus more on company building and culture scaling and all the things like that get much harder as you get larger. We're already 120 people. So we're hitting those inflection points. And then finally being much more external facing, because that's how you add much more value over the life of the company as well. So certainly happy to give up the title one day.
I think that's a great viewpoint, especially as a founder. And, when you're sitting there and you're looking at the different responsibilities, and you mentioned at the top, you do a lot of different things, obviously, as a founder, you got to. How do you break down the time you allocate to each? Because it seemed like it'd be so easy to get sucked into one versus the other. I mean, so people do their whole job as being a CTO, a whole job as being a chief product officer. You're wearing these different hats. How do you manage that to make sure that you're spending the attention in the right place at the right time for the right amount of time, actually?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I definitely think earlier on things happened sequentially. Like, I couldn't focus on all of them at once. And by nature of that, our org was imbalanced at times, and you're playing catch up. So, hired probably 20, 25 engineers before I hired, my second product manager, right? And I had one designer, right? And then we got to 40 engineers as I was working with our VP of engineering during a very challenging recruiting market over the last couple of years to attract talent, and like woke up and was like, wait, we only have 2 product managers and 1 designer still. And so I had to go build out those teams. And so the reality is it's sequential. It's not always, perfect balance. The second thing I'll say is, sometimes wearing all those hats when you're an early company is actually, it collapses the things that you think are distinct into something that's actually not that different. And you don't have to like have all the meetings to talk to the other people to get the information from the other parts of the business to make the decisions, right? It collapses decision making and could actually move faster because I'm in the customer conversation. I'm demoing the product. I'm seeing what's not working for them. Then I'm having the conversation with the engineers building the product. And then, so it just collapses the time it takes to go from customer need to building the right thing. And so in some ways, it gets harder as you have more people to own all of those things. But the good news is if you're hiring the right people at the right levels, it's easy to start giving them up altogether, right? So I have to balance much less, and I have to definitely adjust the depth at which I will go into different things. But everyone who reports to me knows, because I worked at Amazon for a bit, I am very comfortable going very deep where necessary, where I feel like I'm not getting clear answers or I can't wrap my head around it, and then lifting up where I feel like, hey, they've got it. Like everything seems to make sense there.
I like that. And I guess I was just thinking, you obviously have taken the right steps, everything you discussed about getting into this role, being a founder, being the CTO. You went to Amazon, you got the right exposure there at Handy, you built up technical skills. I guess if you were to look back and kind of just reflect on, you've done a lot, so I don't know what the gap will be, but if you were to look back and maybe just look at your career and be like, well, what could I have done differently potentially to prepare for this role at this point in time? Is there anything that kind of stands out?
Sure. I still think if you told me in college this is where my life was going to go, my career, I still think I would have had 1 major that was a non-technical one like I did. I ended up having 2 majors that were non-technical, but I probably would have made one of them comp sci. Like I think I actually would have liked comp sci based on everything that I've learned. And I think not having a comp sci degree made me better at some things, but I still think all in all, like I'd be an even better co-founder and CTO if I also had that, really more so at the early stage of a company, actually. Like probably not now by the time we're this size, but at the early days, having a founder who can just go and build is wildly valuable, right? So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is, I started my career at Bear Stearns. So like the first year was kind of a throwaway in 2007. It was informative and formative in some ways to see an entire company collapse from terrible strategic decision making. But I probably could have watched that without having to participate in financial services in 2007, 2008. So yeah, nothing about me is like suited to the financial services world. So I probably would have just skipped that step.
Interesting. Yeah, obviously your path is, financial services to product to CTO. It's not traditional. I like that because I think it means the door can be open to different people who have different goals and could take different paths. The comp sci is one path, but what I'm seeing more and more is that's not becoming the hard requirement. It's nice to have, like you said, be widely, a huge ad to be able to code early, but that should not be an obstacle if somebody has a desire to start a company or to be in a position that's similar. There's other paths there.
Absolutely. One of the things that I learned from building this company and being the CTO from the start, having to get into the Amazon console, having to be in Datadog, having to be in Okta. There's so many different services, that are available now through API, like anything you can dream of, like pretty quickly you can get your product up and running. That I actually think the value of having the CS degree, it's still hugely valuable, but like it's not for those things anymore. It's not for really the like just get up and running, right? Because all of that stuff is abstracted away now because of AWS and the other providers that we use. And so you really can very quickly start focusing on just building the product that you meant to build, not like all the scaffolding and infrastructure around it. That part was like dramatically easier now than it would have been, right, 10 years ago. So I actually think it's getting easier and easier for non-technical co-founders to build technical businesses.
Awesome. Before I let you go, I like to ask every guest this question. If you could ask a future guest to cover a topic area, what would you like to hear about?
I don't know. I'd love to hear about how people are thinking about AI in their engineering orgs, and specifically about the role of potential things like GitHub Copilot, and how CTOs are thinking about that, and what, are they aggressively trying to pursue it and convince their leadership teams and co-founders to allow them to do that? Do they think that's not the right move? Do they think that's going to make a better engineering org or a lazier engineering org? I'd love to hear about that.
That's actually a really good one. Hopefully, I can find someone who can talk to it at an expert level. I think a lot of people are still thinking about it, but I think that's a great topic. I got to find somebody, because I think it'd be supremely invaluable. What's a good way if somebody wants to reach out to you just to follow up from the podcast, pick your brain on something you mentioned, non-traditional to technology path? What's a good way of getting a hold of you?
Yeah, people can they can LinkedIn me and message me that way. They can also email me at Rebecca@Regal.io. Happy to have a conversation over email as well.
Okay, awesome. We'll make sure we include those in the show notes. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Rebecca. It's been fantastic, and I appreciate everything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amir. Take
Awesome.
care.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, if you know someone that can speak to Rebecca's topic, reach out, or if you can, I'd love to have you on the show. I think it's a great area to focus an episode on. And secondly, if you like the episode, share it with somebody, like, subscribe, leave a review, all the things you know what to do. That's how the podcast grows. And I thank everyone who does. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.